According to Albert Einstein, we cannot solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. My name is Corinna Stoeffl, and I'm the host of Toward a New World. The world seems to be falling apart. Are you as frustrated as I am with the talk about how to fix things or what needs to change, yet nothing changes? In the episodes, I invite people to look from different perspectives, sometimes even contrary to the current points of view. My intention is to evoke a different level of consciousness by empowering listeners to explore what is true for them and begin to live their lives from that place, thus changing their lives and through it, the world. If this appeals to you, I ask you to subscribe to the podcast on this channel.
Hello and welcome. Here we are again. And today I have a guest, Meghan Bonde, who is a leader in the neurodivergency movement. And let me introduce her quickly and then we'll dive right into it. Meghan Bonde is a leader in the neurodivergency movement and supports professionals to increase their impact and create freedom by working the way they are wired. As a TEDx speaker, speech language pathologist, and transformational training facilitator, she has influenced thousands of leaders globally to design inclusive learning opportunities. She's a dancer, swimmer, lifelong learner, and is most proud of her leadership as a can I pronounce that word correctly? Neurodivergent self-advocate and in her exceptional family. Welcome, Meghan. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start so we are all on the same page. Can you give us a definition of what neurodivergence is and how it is different from
From neurodiversity versus neurodivergence?
Yes, thank you. I'm having senior moments lately.
Love it. So I'd like to start off with just a little bit of context about how I've shifted into the neurodiversity movement. And I started my career as a speech language pathologist. And when we were learning about supporting children and adults with communication disorders with their speech and language, we were really taught from a medical model that the people had a disorder, that we needed to look at the deficits and we needed to figure out how to provide an intervention to support them in their area of deficit. When I discovered neurodiversity, it's a complete paradigm shift. It's really looking at differences as just part of the human condition, that when we think and feel and behave and perceive the world in different ways, that's by design, and that it's not a pathologizing way to look at people. And so it's a big shift from what we see in the medical model in our educational systems to just look at neurodiversity that way, that there is no ideal way of being. And so it's socially constructed of what is considered normal and what we're trying to get people towards. Now, the term neurodivergent is a socio-political identity, similar to race, gender, sexual orientation, age, any area that you can be discriminated against, that people need protection around a marginalized identity.
Yeah.
That is neurodivergent. And so if we're talking about neurodiversity, we're talking about a lens. We're including people who are not neurodivergent, who don't fall into that identity marker as marginalized by how they show up in the world, how they're wired. And if we say everybody is neurodiverse, yes, but not everybody is neurodivergent. Some people face more discrimination and have an identity that is marginalized based on a social construct.
I fully hear why this differentiation is important. And I don't get, and that's on a personal level, why we need to judge and say, oh, only one thing is normal and everything else is abnormal. I never got that really, but I know it exists. Would you be able to share since when that whole neurodiversity, neurodivergent, etc., is even in our language? Because I do not remember these words when I went to school in the mid-90s to get my counseling degree.
Yeah, the term neurodiversity was coined about 30 years ago, but it's been slow in building momentum to really become more widespread.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has been around for a while, but I got my master's 15 years ago, and we really didn't talk about this lens in my program. So
Okay, so it is pretty, even though the term exists for a longer time, it is pretty new in the usage of it.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I get that when we talk about neurodiversity, and especially from your background, we tend to think probably more about younger people, kids that are in school, maybe starting to go to university. How does it currently affect that kind of population? And I want to expand on that down the road.
So what we're seeing in the schools and the healthcare system is more awareness around different traits to be able to identify people. And more children are getting identified as autistic, ADHD, gifted, sensory integration, auditory processing, anxiety. There's so many different ways that schools and healthcare systems are showing an awareness to some of these traits and differences. And as kids get identified, many parents, including myself, are realizing, wait, I have a lot of these similar traits. And so the kids are, getting some different supports at school with their 504 plan or their individualized education plan or their advanced learning plan. And it's a confusing thing for some people to think, well, if we believe that there is no ideal brain, why would some people get these individualized plans or supports? Doesn't that go against the neurodiversity movement? Well, I would argue no, that our systems are really not built for how kids are showing up with certain traits. And so they do need some protections often. And oftentimes when they advocate for themselves and their parents advocate for them to have their needs met in schools, it's an opportunity for learning, for the team to come together and think about how to best support the student, and that can make it more inclusive for everybody.
Yeah, because I think originally our educational systems have been designed for a certain set of parameters that were considered normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so starting to expand and include abnormal, which is absolutely normal,
Yep.
into the pool is really important. But I would like to go, like you said, you recognized through your children that you may have some of those traits. Now, I'm a bit older than you, and I know that going to school and learning about ADD, ADHD, for instance, that I realized I might be ADD. And so how does that impact older people?
So many older people who are not identified
Mm-hmm.
have grown up thinking that certain traits they have need to be hidden or changed, and that they were problematic. And to be able to discover the neurodiversity lens and think that, wait, maybe the way I hyper focus on something that is really interesting to me and I can get into it deeply for long periods of time, it's even hard for me to shift out of that. And then when I'm doing something that's not interesting to me, to have so many different things capturing my attention, and maybe that's not wrong. Maybe I'm designed that way and there's benefits about that. And sometimes there's challenges and needs involved and supports that can help when that trait is not serving you. And that doesn't make that trait wrong. It's just everybody has different strengths and needs, and they are supportive in some contexts and situations and not as supportive in others. And so really understanding your traits can help you set up your environment to better support you, because really we don't need to be changing people and their traits. Everybody can continuously grow, and I'm not saying that we don't want both neurodivergent and neurotypical. Everybody can continuously grow, but we need to be designing our environments for us to be thriving the most based on our unique traits.
Yeah. Listening to what you just said made me go back when I developed a special technique in creating in-camera multiple exposures. I could be hyper-focused and work on something and totally forget the time and saying, as a sudden my stomach started growling. And I said, okay, I think I might need something to eat. It felt like I had done work for maybe 2 hours, but the clock showed that I had been working for 6 hours. And conversely, if I am bored, then what else can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do? And I get that it was helpful for me to just, oh, this is how I operate, and that's my way of being with myself. But if I'm locked into those labels, then it gets difficult. So, do you have a suggestion for older people to not necessarily have the need to go and see a psychologist, but how could they start working with recognizing their traits?
Yeah, not necessary to have a professional identify you. It's okay to self-identify and learn about the different traits and understand yourself looking through that neurodiversity lens. And so to just start being open to learning and talking to leaders who have learned more about neurodiversity. And I think the labels are often so attached with the deficit model, the medical model, the pathologizing model, that if I do a Google search about ADHD, a lot of things will come up that are negatively describing this way of being, this cognitive profile. And really, the problem is not, I mean, the label itself is not ideal, that the word deficit is in there, or like autism spectrum disorder, that those names don't accurately describe people's experiences. But so many people have found it very freeing and empowering to have an identification and to say, okay, I'm ADHD, I'm autistic, I'm gifted, I'm twice exceptional, whatever it is, and to say, I define it this way from a strength-based approach. I don't define it based on these stereotypical traits. And I know that just saying I'm ADHD, I'm only one person, every single ADHDer is different. It's just sort of patterns, and it has helped so many people understand themselves once they find the writing and the literature and the research that uses the strength-based perspective about their identity, and to find their tribe, to be able to people who have had similar experiences and really unmask and heal that their way of being is not wrong.
I so agree, and I know how it impacted me in a positive way when I realized maybe I have some ADD traits here. Would you be able to give older people an idea on how they might look on Google for a strength-based description? Because I'm assuming that if I just put in something that, first of all, the medical model, the deficit model is showing up.
Yes, you do have to be intentional about where you're consuming your information, and that the people who are sharing it also identify as neurodivergent, because often in the research, the neurodivergent perspective was left out. And so one of the leaders that is a go-to for me is Sunny Jane Wise. They wrote a book called Everyone is Neurodiverse, and also goes into the difference between neurodiversity and neurodivergent in that book, and really talks about neuronormativity. And neuronormativity is this just ideology. It's a way of thinking that there is a normal, and so that we can reject neuronormativity in the same way we reject white supremacy, we reject patriarchy, we reject heteronormativity. Any of these ideologies where there is thinking that one way is better than another, or one way is right, or one way is normal. Mm-hmm. And so neuronormativity is a big part of what Sunny Jane Wise talks about, shares about all these different wide range of traits, and how we can see them as strengths and honor people's needs.
So that what you just said, I mean, one thing that I talk a lot about is appreciation of diversity and getting away from what I call mono-culture, because it's not just in human traits, it's in farming, it's everywhere, where we want to have just one thing, and that way we can control everything. But I'm wondering, having more people even diagnosed with different neurodivergent traits, is there a special reason for it, that we are more knowledgeable and start diagnosing more? I also have heard people doing the hypothesis, oh, this is because of the nutrition, this is because of this, that, or the other. Is there anything that you know that you could share, that we as a sudden start talking more about it, except for the fact that it always has been that way?
Yes, it truly has. That we've always had neurodiversity. You know, instead of the word diagnosed, I love to use the word identified, of just
Mhm.
noticing this part,
Okay.
and that takes it away from that medical model. And I think the identification rate is going up because, you know, a wide variety of reasons. The systems in schools, like I said, are really identifying kids' differences rather than saying, you're bad, you're lazy, you need to be punished or
Mm.
expelled or
Okay.
removed from school, and saying, okay, if we're noticing that a kid is not doing well, not meeting the expectations, let's look at it through a lens of unmet needs and the system not being designed for them, and how we could make adjustments to support them. And when that happens, you know, more adults are just discovering it at the same time, just as the awareness is really spread and increased. We also have adjusted the criteria over time, in both as the DSM changes, which is a huge part of the medical model of looking at people's, there's over 500 different diagnoses in the diagnostic statistical manual. And so all of that would fall under the umbrella of neurodivergent. And there's even identities beyond that are not in the DSM that also would fall under that umbrella term. So it's just really the increased awareness and the changing criteria is sort of contributing to people discovering this about themselves. But the food, no, food doesn't cause someone to have a certain cognitive profile, but it does have an impact on our health and our behavior and our emotions and all these different things. All of the different components of our daily lives are going to impact us, but people are born with a wide variety of cognitive profiles. And so with any person, there's going to be a nature and nurture interaction.
Mhm. So, in a way, the way looking at what you were saying is, we are slowly moving towards normal, in a sense of allowing the variety and the individuality, instead of saying everybody needs to fit into this small box and anything outside of it is wrong.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and it feels also, that means there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. So, how are you working to spread awareness?
I'm thinking about my unique strengths and needs, because I want to do what energizes me, what my gifts are that I've been given for how I can do this work.
Mhm.
And that to me is the core of celebrating neurodiversity, is when we think about that for ourselves. And so I love to speak and I love to write, and I have a coaching program where I work with neurodivergent entrepreneurs. And I show up for my kids by honoring their strengths and needs. I show up for myself by designing my workday that integrates rest and creativity and time in nature and focuses on the things that really light me up, and I say no to the things that don't. Those are the ways that I think we can most celebrate neurodiversity and be leaders within our homes and with our most tightly knit communities, of thinking about how are we celebrating it in ourselves.
Would you share how you have become aware of what works for you and what doesn't work for you? Because I can imagine that a lot of people, they're just living their life, and I often even identifying what works for them is not necessarily something that we are used to.
It's so true. We get into autopilot,
Mm-hmm.
and our brains, with neuroplasticity, we get into one way and then we don't even realize that that's not sort of our natural way of how we're wired. And so we've created these pathways in our brains of what we think is uh, what's working for us. And so to make that shift, the first step is to really just stop and pause and take some time to really reflect on what energizes me, what drains me of energy. And in whatever way you do that, whether it's starting with a few minutes a day, or, I started going on walks around the pond in the open space and taking out my headphones to not even listen to music or a podcast, but to really just take some breaths and allow myself to just be. That is the only way to be able to start to think about what might be possible, and thinking about my values and my vision for how I want to live my life and work, and what is working for me and what's not, and taking one step at a time from there. I've had a lot of help. I've asked a lot of people to be my mentor and my guide, and done some
Mm-hmm.
reading, and all of those things reject this autopilot culture. When we say, I don't know it all, I'm going to reach out and connect with somebody and be a receiver of support and help, and listen to my own wisdom, that goes against this. We need to constantly be giving, 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 and say, no, this is a flow of giving and receiving. And let's pause and see who can be a mentor or a guide on our journey of figuring out what lifts us up and makes us shine.
What Listening to you, what I realized too is how much are we trained to multitask. Like, you said taking the earbuds out and just being present. Because implicitly you're saying, oh, I need to use that time in order to get that accomplished while I'm also, and being present with what is, which also includes being present with myself, is such an important part to any art of personal growth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What suggestions would you have for people in general to discover their unique style of being in the world? Can you give us a few ideas?
So it starts a little bit with trial and error, being willing to have failure of trying something that doesn't work and reflecting on it, and tapping into your own creativity, knowing that you might create something that works for you that has never been done before, that you've never seen anybody do before. You can use different people as inspiration. And for me, having some structure and routine around that has been liberating, because when I have it like sort of designed in my schedule for certain times where I just be, or I have creativity time, and that just gives me the freedom that I need to explore and try new things. And so some people feel very stifled by structure. And for me, there's this kind of integration and flow with structure and freedom that has been really important for me.
Okay. Yeah. I feel utterly grateful for you to you for sharing all those ideas. And on the one hand, I say, duh, it should be obvious, and yet obviously it isn't obvious because we need to talk about it. We need to become aware of, due to the way we've been entrained in growing up ourselves. Are there any closing words, suggestions, ideas that you would like to give us?
I think it's really important to think about your definition of success and really think about what is meaningful for you as you're going through this, because veering off of the path that it's sort of like when you're skiing on a groomed run or walking on a trail that has been walked on a lot, and to veer off and do something different is like going into deep snow powder or going off the trail. And so it's bumpy and it can be uncomfortable, but over time you can create those new paths for yourself. And I just love the metaphor in thinking about neurodiversity is as essential for our communities to thrive as biodiversity is for our ecosystems to flourish. So when we really show all of our traits and embrace all of our differences, that is what's going to create such healthy, flourishing, vibrant, beautiful communities in our world.
And I fully agree. One of my most favorite quotes is by Albert Einstein, that it takes a different level of consciousness to solve a problem than what created it. And what I'm hearing from you is exactly the neurodiversity, and allowing for that and cherishing that is what is creating that different level of consciousness. And what if it's time for us to actually start finding solutions by celebrating the diversity that we have among our people?
Mm-hmm. Einstein has another quote that if you measure a fish by its ability to climb a tree The fish
Yeah.
will live its entire life feeling very stupid. And so just finding each of our gifts and not trying to measure our skills based on a test that really doesn't match how we were designed.
Yeah. There is so much more possibility and the invitation to be who we truly are, not who we are supposed to be according to whoever that person is.
Mm-hmm.
So, Megan, I really, really want to thank you for being here and for enlightening the listeners. And I look forward to maybe having you back in the future and have another conversation about neurodiversity.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Appreciate it.